In 2016, the Gates Foundation decided that the African chickens weren't fat enough. Not only that, their eggs were too tiny. Gates came up with a brilliant plan. Let's genetically modify chickens. The University of Wageningen and Hendrix Genetics, both from the Netherlands, invented a new chicken species made especially for poor African families. What a marvelous idea! And what a great philanthropist! Genetically modified chickens that no African family had asked for. According to Janet Mawiyo, president of the Kenya Community Development Foundation, the native chickens are great. They may look a little skimpy, but they taste terrific. And they are unvaccinated. Our chickens feed themselves in nature. If we get more of them, who's going to pay for the food? And who will pay for the vaccinations? She asked in an interview. Excuse me? Vaccinations? Are these genetically modified super chickens not perfect when they come rolling out of the lab? Obviously not. They have to be vaccinated. That explains why the Dutch research supervisor, Lisbeth van der Waay, said, "The chickens must come with a clear manual. They need good food and plenty of water. If not, the production will probably be disappointing in practice." So, genetically modified chickens that need special food and vaccinations. Gates was delighted. In a press conference, he stated that 100,000 chickens were going to be donated to the poor in Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Tanzania. He tried to give them to Bolivia too, but they didn't want them. As a matter of fact, the African people didn't want them either, as Janet Mawiyo pointed out. But for some reason, Bill Gates always gets what he wants in Africa. Genetically modified chickens, vaccinations. It seems like he has built up a great relationship with the mostly corrupted leaders of those countries. Oh, and the chicken story had a little tail to it. Shortly after Gates had introduced his super chickens, the bird flu erupted. In Nigeria alone, more than 750 outbreaks led to 3.5 million dead chickens. Coincidence? You tell me. At any rate, all of those lost chickens had to be replaced by Hendrix Genetics from the Netherlands. I sure hope they offered them at a special discount. Oh, and the man in charge of the genetically modified chicken project at Wageningen University, Johan van Arendonk, promoter of the thesis we showed you less than 3 minutes ago, was welcomed by Hendrix Genetics as head of research and development on the 1st of January 2016. Four years later, he was promoted Chief Technology and Innovation Officer and part of the Executive Committee. That's how it works, my friends. First, you get several millions from the Gates Foundation or the Rockefeller Foundation to research the possibilities for a new chicken breed in several African countries. Of course, you accept the assignment. You set up a research program that is carried out by several African assistant researchers under your supervision. Research papers are published, and Mr. Gates is no doubt satisfied with your research findings and, as such, the business opportunities you offered him. So, what follows is a promotion. Off you go to Hendrix Genetics, where you receive another 9 million from Gates to genetically create a new breed of chicken. The moment you accept the job at Hendrix Genetics, you are in Gates's pocket. You will make whatever he wants you to make. It doesn't matter if your creation can only survive on good food, clean water, and vaccinations. Who cares? Nobody will know. The mainstream media won't say a thing. Who cares about the coincidental outbreak of the bird flu within a month after the delivery of your creation? Who cares that thousands of African people were devastated, ruined? They didn't have the money to buy more of your super chickens, nor their high-quality food, nor all of their future vaccinations. They had nothing left. But then again, we're talking about Africa. Nobody cares about Africa, right? The mainstream media remained silent, as always. Well, they reported the bird flu, of course. Yet another great opportunity for Bill Gates to develop yet another vaccination project. Because that, dearest viewers, is what Africa needs. It doesn't need clean water, nutritious food, or schools. It needs vaccinations. Chickens are not the only animal species that fascinate Gates. So do mosquitoes. Well, actually, he hates them, just like anybody else, as some of them spread diseases such as Zika and malaria. And so, Gates came up with yet another brilliant plan to improve the world. He paid the British company Oxitec millions of dollars to develop a program to genetically modify mosquitoes. Oxitec developed a modified version of Aedes aegypti, the mosquito responsible for transmitting Zika and dengue fever. The males were genetically tampered with and received a self-limiting gene, targeting only the females, the ones that sting for blood, and by doing so spread disease. When the GMO males mated with the wild females, the self-limiting gene was passed on to their offspring, killing only the females. After several generations, there would only be males left. In and of itself, a brilliant plan, and quite a gentle way to wipe out an entire species of mosquitoes. Several trials were held in India and in Panama, after which the first official grand release took place in Brazil in May 2018. Millions of genetically modified mosquitoes were released in a city over a period of 27 weeks. The results seemed promising at first, and the Gates Foundation made sure the press released articles about its immense success. But after a year and a half, the genetically modified male mosquitoes were having a ball with the natural local female mosquitoes, and billions of hybrid baby bugs were born to pester the inhabitants and to continue breeding like there was no tomorrow. The self-limiting gene was not doing what it was supposed to do. The result was disastrous. The species had only become stronger than ever before. Did you hear about this in the news? No. It can only be found by reading long and boring scientific papers that nobody tends to do. Only a few alternative media reported it, but as always, they were ignored, overruled, and ridiculed as conspiracy theorists. Instead of abandoning this sinking ship, Bill Gates took it a step further. He asked Oxitec to genetically modify yet another species, the females of Anopheles albinmanus, 1 out of 4 mosquito species that can transmit malaria. Trials were held in Burkina Faso in Africa. The locals resisted. They asked for mosquito nets, a cheap and very effective solution. But, as always, they were not heard. Why is it always that these experimental trials are held in less developed countries? Don't these lives matter? Now, even though the idea of no more mosquitoes may sound appealing to many, everyone who understands anything about ecosystems and the balance of nature knows that this is bad news. One does not play God and get away with it. Genetically modifying one kind of mosquito will have far-reaching effects on nature and thus on people, especially in rural areas where people depend on agriculture to survive. The entire ecosystem could end up disrupted in ways that cannot be foreseen. Now, normally, it would take years to pass an environmental law for these kinds of things. But because of COVID-19, the Environmental Protection Agency decided differently. Environmental laws will not be upheld at this point. The mosquitoes may be released. And this time, in Florida. And so, in the summer of 2020, swarms of genetically modified mosquitoes were to be set free. But due to public protest, it was put on hold. Now, I can hear people think, what's the big deal? The annihilation of mosquitoes, isn't that a dream come true? Well, it was, and still is, presented that way by Gates. But let's have a look at an article in Science from 2010. 11 years ago, a group of Japanese researchers developed a mosquito that spread vaccine instead of disease. However, the regulatory and ethical problems will prevent the critters from ever taking wing, the researchers stated. Yet, 3 years later, the US Army Medical Research and Development Command picked up on this idea in collaboration with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They did not seem to be bothered with ethical problems. The study to turn mosquitoes into flying vaccinators was Gates's new target. And not just Gates's. Why was the US Army suddenly involved? Doesn't that point us in the direction of biological warfare? Now, for those viewers who believe that weaponizing mosquitoes is too far-fetched, please dive into the subject and you will find out that as early as 1953, the US initiated its weaponization efforts with disease vectors, as they called it, focused on fleas spreading the plague, mosquitoes causing brain infections by spreading encephalitis, and mosquitoes spreading yellow fever. Experimental trials were held over Florida and Georgia to see if the insects could be used successfully as a bioweapon to kill off urban populations. A declassified army document from 1981 entitled An Evaluation of Entomological Warfare as a Potential Danger to the United States and European NATO Nations describes in detail how the government raised millions of mosquitoes as weapons and released them in covert operations over US residents. Calculations showed it would cost only 29 cents per death if half of the population were to be killed. 29 cents per death! What a wonderful cost-effective way to execute a massacre. There's nothing new under the sun. For decades, armies all over the world have done these horrid experiments on their own and other countries' unsuspecting citizens. It didn't matter how many people died. It didn't matter if innocent children died. All that mattered was information, which is gruesome in and of itself. But how does it make you feel that right now the Gates Foundation is involved in all of this? Of course, different target, modern-day equipment, but the idea never changed. How to perform genocide in the most efficient and cost-effective way. Depopulation with a capital D. Much of the collaboration between the Gates Foundation and the US Army is classified. From 2013 onward, not much can be found unless you have special clearance. Why am I not surprised? Oh, and Oxitec, the company that is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to develop the genetically modified insects, is tied to the US Army as well. Their current CEO, Gray Franson, worked for the US Department of State. He was advisor to the US Navy. He wrote the first guide to non-governmental organizations for the military and is seen as an expert on NGO military relations. Furthermore, when he was president of Olfactor, a company similar to Oxitec, he signed agreements with the US military's Walter Reed Army Institute of Research for the military bases around the world to use Olfactor's technology. When a GMO company's technology is used by the Army and there is a direct link with the Biodefense Lab, Fort Detrick, Maryland, notorious for its covert biowarfare tests on US civilians to examine the feasibility of mosquitoes as vectors for bioweapons, you can rest assured that the company and its president were up to their ears in the development of GMO bioweapons. That same man now runs the mosquito show in Florida as president of Oxitec with the money of Bill Gates. If Gates is working on a better world, do you really think some of his projects were classified? Why on earth is he spending millions of dollars on genetically modified bugs that can be and have been deployed to spread disease and to vaccinate people? Why the secrecy? Are we being used as guinea pigs for more military tests? And why Florida? Is there a connection with the eeny-weeny tiny super drones that look like mosquitoes? Back in 2018, there were headlines about the race between the US and Russia to be the first manufacturer of the unmanned aerial vehicle, the UAV, or micro-aerial vehicle, the MAV. Using nanotechnology, these little drones can be deployed against people during, for instance, peace protests. Equipped with a camera and a microphone, they can land on you, take samples of your DNA, or leave tracking nanotechnology on your skin. Strategic analyst Paul Buchanan told NBR in July 2018 about the interest in UAVs. The predictions were that the UAV industry could be worth $89 billion by 2022. Somehow, we find it hard to believe that our philanthropist Bill Gates has nothing to do with these insect drones. It's probably only a matter of months before he comes out with yet another interview promoting the infinite possibilities of the nanobugs. In June 2020, Bill Gates talked about his surprise that so many people don't trust his good intentions, especially when it comes to vaccinations. We're just giving money away, he said. We just write checks to pharma companies. Up until April 2020, the WHO's biggest sponsor was the American government. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was number 2. When President Trump put a halt to this funding, Mr. Gates became the WHO's biggest sugar daddy. He owns the WHO.
Halting funding for the WHO during a world health crisis is as dangerous as it sounds. The world needs them now more than ever. Well, the truth is the group actually needs Gates more than ever. With the U.S. taking a pause, he'll now be their largest active donor. That's right, 1 out of every $10 that the WHO gets is from the world's second wealthiest man. So should we be concerned about how much one man has maybe an outsized influence with an obviously corruptible entity such as the WHO? Joining me now.
He's treated like a head of state, not only at the WHO, but also at the G20. He is one of the most influential men in global health. The Foundation's impact on the WHO is enormous. If they weren't there, if they walked away with their money, the deleterious impact would be profound, and everyone is all too aware of that. The WHO is owned by Bill Gates. Its Director General, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, is nothing but a puppet. His strings are pulled by Gates and the Clintons. In 2018, yet another scandal came to light. Here's what happened. Before Tedros became Director General of the WHO, He held 2 high-level positions in the government of Ethiopia, Minister of Health and subsequently Minister of Foreign Affairs. He became very friendly with the Clintons and a speaker at the Clinton Global Initiative of the Clinton Foundation. And he was board chair of the Global Fund. The Global Fund presents itself as an independent organization that aims at eradicating AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. While Tedros was chair of the Global Fund, the organization was involved in scandals about fraud and misappropriation of funds. An investigation showed that 67% spent on an AIDS program in Mauritania was misspent. And Mauritania wasn't the only country that missed out on a lot of money. According to financial investigators Larry Doyle and John Moynihan, we are looking at a classic example of money laundering. Here's how it works. The Clinton Foundation received millions of dollars from poor countries, such as the Dominican Republic, Rwanda and Lesotho, which is rather strange, don't you think? I mean, aren't those countries supposed to be on the receiving end of the cash flow? Anyway, those countries received money from the Global Fund. The Global Fund then received millions of dollars from USAID via the State Department. Who oversaw those funds? None other than Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. The Clinton Foundation subsequently received millions from the Global Fund. Indeed, money laundering at its finest. Doyle and Moynihan testified before Congress about the corruption in the Clinton Foundation, in which the Global Fund, at that time chaired by Tedros, our current President General of the WHO, played an important role. The same Tedros who is now telling the world what to do about COVID-19. Funny world, isn't it? Are you starting to have doubts yet about Mr. Gates' philanthropy? Are you ready for more that will put him behind bars if it comes out into the open? Then follow me to part 10.